Somewhere in the world right now, a heart just skipped. Not in a romantic way, in a dangerous way. An electrical signal that was supposed to fire didn't, and for a fraction of a second, a heart that should have beaten went silent. But that person is fine, walking around, having coffee, completely unaware. Because buried in their chest, smaller than a matchbox, a tiny machine noticed that missed beat and fired a pulse of electricity to keep them alive. There are millions of people on Earth right now with one of these machines inside them, every second of every day, watching, correcting, keeping the rhythm. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The device that keeps all those hearts beating, one of the most important machines in medical history, exists because a man reached into a box, grabbed the wrong part by mistake, and almost threw it away. Stick with me, because this is a story about how a tiny error, less than a millimeter of difference, ended up saving millions of lives. And by the end, you'll understand why the man who made it spent his life insisting it was never really an accident at all. But to feel why this matters, we have to start with how terrifying the problem was. There's a condition called heart block. In a healthy heart, a natural electrical signal travels through the muscle and tells it when to beat. A steady rhythm every second of your life without you ever thinking about it. In heart block, that signal gets interrupted. The message doesn't get through, and the heart starts to fail at the one job it can never stop doing. For most of human history, this was a death sentence. Doctors could only stand and watch. There was nothing that could fix a broken electrical rhythm inside the living chest. And then, in the 1950s, the first attempts arrived, and honestly, they were nightmares. The earliest pacemakers weren't implanted. They were enormous external machines, some the size of a television set, that the patient was physically plugged into, wired to the wall, tethered to a giant box by cables running into their body. Picture that. If you had a weak heart, your life was chained to a machine you couldn't move. Some delivered jolts so strong, they hurt with every beat. And if the power went out, or someone tripped over the cord, the thing keeping you alive simply stopped. That was the state of the art. Keeping a heart going meant bolting a human being to furniture. Everyone knew there had to be a better way. Nobody had found it. Now let's meet the man who would, completely by accident. His name is Wilson Greatbatch, a 1950s engineer in Buffalo, New York. Not a doctor, an electronics guy, a tinkerer working out of a barn behind his house. Years earlier, Greatbatch had a conversation that stuck in his brain like a splinter. Over lunch, two surgeons described heart block to him, a heart losing its rhythm. And something clicked in his engineer's mind. That's not really a medical problem. That's an electrical problem, a broken signal. And broken signals can be fixed. He couldn't let the idea go, but he had no path to it. So it sat in the back of his mind for years, until one ordinary day, working on something completely different, his hands made a mistake his brain hadn't planned. Here's what happened. Greatbatch wasn't even trying to build a pacemaker that day. He was building an oscillator, a small device to record the sound of a heartbeat. To finish the circuit, he needed a specific resistor, a tiny component that controls the flow of electricity. Resistors are little things that look like grains of rice with wires on each end. The only way to tell their strength apart is by reading tiny colored stripes on the side, bands less than a millimeter wide. He needed one marked brown, black, orange, 10,000 ohms. He reached into his box of parts and pulled out one marked brown, black, green instead. A different part. A resistor 100 times stronger than the one he wanted. He didn't notice. He soldered it in, and when he switched the circuit on, it didn't do what he expected. Instead of quietly recording, the device pulsed. A burst of electricity, then a pause, then another pulse. A steady, rhythmic beat, about a second between each one. Greatbatch froze. Because he'd heard that rhythm before. He knew it in his bones. That pulse, that pause, that pulse.
It was almost exactly the timing of a human heartbeat. He later said he just stared in disbelief. His mistake hadn't ruined the experiment. His mistake was mimicking the heart. And in that instant, the splinter from years earlier, the accident in front of him, slammed together. The surgeons, the broken signal.
And now a tiny circuit on his bench, generating the exact rhythm a failing heart had lost. He wasn't looking at a broken recorder anymore. He was looking at the thing that could replace a heart's own signal. Small enough, someday, to fit inside a human chest. Objective: record the sound of a heartbeat. Result: accidentally build the thing that keeps the heartbeat going. But here's what I really want you to understand. The accident was only the beginning. What came next was 2 years of relentless, unglamorous work, because a spark of an idea is worthless until someone is stubborn enough to make it real. Greatbatch shrank the device down and sealed it in epoxy resin so the body's fluids couldn't destroy it. He obsessed over every detail, because if this gadget stopped, someone died. Then came the moment that changed medicine. Working with a surgeon named William Chardak and his colleague Andrew Gage, Greatbatch watched his tiny device connected to the exposed heart of a dog. And it took control. The little 2 cubic inch circuit reached out and steadied a living heartbeat. Greatbatch later wrote that nothing he ever did would top the feeling of that day, watching a piece of electronics he'd designed take command of a living heart. In 1960, they were ready for a human being. The first patient was a 77-year-old man dying of complete heart block. They implanted the pacemaker into his chest. And it worked. His heart held its rhythm. A man who should have died within a year lived on, a machine keeping perfect time inside him. That same year, they implanted the device in 10 more patients, some of whom would live for decades. But there was still one deadly weakness: the battery. Early ones were unreliable and leaked, and a pacemaker that dies is worse than useless. So Greatbatch solved that too, developing a long-lasting lithium battery that became the standard, the thing that made these devices dependable enough to trust with a life for years at a time. And here's the detail I can't stop thinking about. Wilson Greatbatch, a deeply religious man, spent the rest of his life refusing to call it an accident. When people said he got lucky with that wrong resistor, he pushed back. He believed he was meant to find it, that the mistake was the point. And in a strange way, both things are true. His hand slipped. He grabbed the wrong part. That was pure chance. But the chance only meant something because his mind had carried that problem for years, ready to recognize the answer the instant it appeared. The accident opened the door. He was just the only one standing there, prepared to walk through it. So the next time you hear a heartbeat, your own or someone you love, think about this. Right now, millions of those beats aren't coming from the body alone. They're being kept in time by a tiny machine humming in the dark of someone's chest. And every one of those beats traces back to a barn in Buffalo, to an engineer building the wrong thing, a box of parts, and one wrong resistor that a man very nearly threw in the trash. He reached for the wrong part, and millions of hearts are still beating because of it. The world wasn't built perfectly. Some of its greatest inventions were simply accidentally created.